I'm Elaine Morrison, 34, and I built a tech empire that most people have never heard of. That's by design. While my security software protects millions, I've stayed in the shadows. Ironic, since my sister Allison spent years telling everyone I'd never amount to anything. When her engagement party invitation arrived after years of radio silence, I almost declined. But curiosity won. I never imagined her perfect evening would implode because her fiancé decided to Google my name at dinner. Before I tell you how my sister's perfect engagement dinner turned into a disaster, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you want more stories about family drama and sweet revenge. Growing up in Brookline, a comfortable Boston suburb, Allison and I shared a bedroom but lived in different worlds. Just 2 years older, my sister was everything I wasn't: blonde, beautiful, and effortlessly popular. Our dynamic was established early: Allison Bennett, the golden child, and me, the awkward sister who preferred dismantling computers to discussing crushes. Our family home on Maple Street wasn't large, but it was filled with the evidence of our diverging interests. Allison's side of our shared bedroom overflowed with teen magazines, makeup, and cheerleading trophies. Mine featured robotics competition medals, dog-eared programming books, and a constantly evolving computer setup my father had helped me build. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mother Grace's unintentional mantra. She never said it maliciously, but the comparison stung nonetheless. Mom had been homecoming queen herself, and she simply didn't understand my fascination with circuit boards and code. Dad was different. Frank Morrison worked as an electrical engineer and recognized something in my obsessive interest in technology. While Mom took Allison shopping, Dad and I built computers in the garage. "Your sister might win the beauty pageants," he'd tell me, "but you're going to change the world someday." Allison's cruelty started small: borrowing my homework, mocking my thrift store clothes to her friends, or casually mentioning my social awkwardness to boys I liked. By high school, her tactics had evolved into something more calculating. During sophomore year, I developed my first serious crush on Daniel Parker, who shared my passion for mathematics. After weeks of study sessions, he finally asked me to the winter formal. The night before our date, Allison invited him over while I was at coding club. When I returned home, she casually mentioned they'd be attending the dance together instead. "He just wasn't interested in you that way, Elaine," she said with practiced sympathy. "Don't be mad at him. Not everyone appreciates your type." Another incident occurred during junior year when my science project on encryption algorithms won the regional competition. Local newspapers covered the event, and a reporter came to our house. Somehow, Allison managed to position herself in every photograph, explaining aspects of our project. The article featured her prominently, with my name misspelled in the final paragraph. "They just couldn't fit everything in," she explained innocently. At least our family got recognized. Our parents' reactions to these incidents set the pattern for our adult relationship. Dad would pull me aside, acknowledging the unfairness while encouraging me to focus on my goals. "Success is the best revenge," he'd say. Mom would minimize the conflict. "Your sister just has a stronger personality. You need to learn to stand up for yourself." High school graduation marked the pinnacle of our childhood rivalry. I was named valedictorian, while Allison was voted most likely to succeed and best dressed. The night before commencement, I practiced my speech for hours, nervous but proud. The next morning, my speech note cards mysteriously disappeared. When I confronted Allison, she shrugged. "Maybe you should have made backup copies. Isn't that what computer geeks do?" I delivered a stumbling, improvised speech while Allison watched from the front row, a sympathetic smile masking her satisfaction. Later, when relatives commented on my apparent nervousness, she graciously defended me. "Public speaking isn't really Elaine's thing. She's more comfortable with machines than people." College finally gave us the physical distance our relationship desperately needed. Allison attended Emerson College for fashion merchandising, leveraging her popularity and connections to secure internships at glossy magazines. I earned a scholarship to MIT, disappearing into the computer science department with an intensity that alarmed even my professors. We saw each other during holidays, maintaining a strained politeness that fooled no one. Allison filled family dinners with stories about celebrity encounters and exclusive parties. I mostly listened, occasionally mentioning a particularly interesting algorithm or research project, watching eyes glaze over as I spoke. "No one understands what you're talking about, Elaine," Allison would interrupt, patting my hand condescendingly. "Tell us something normal people care about. Are you dating anyone?" By graduation, we had become virtual strangers who happened to share parents. Allison moved to New York, working her way through fashion industry jobs while building an impressive Instagram following. I stayed in Massachusetts, quietly building the foundation of what would become my future company. Neither of us knew that our childhood competition was about to become dramatically one-sided, just not in the direction anyone expected. After graduating with honors from MIT, I accepted a junior developer position at ByteSecure, a small cybersecurity startup in Boston. The pay was abysmal, the hours brutal, and the office quite literally a converted storage closet, but I was ecstatic. While my classmates chased prestigious roles at Google and Microsoft, I wanted to understand how small companies transformed into giants. My first year consisted of endless debugging sessions and coffee-fueled coding marathons. Most weekends found me hunched over my laptop at 3 a.m., rewriting security protocols while my peers posted photos from trendy clubs. Each time Allison shared another glamorous New York adventure, I pushed myself harder. "Still playing with computers?" she'd text, attaching photos of herself at Fashion Week or rubbing shoulders with minor celebrities. I rarely responded, channeling my frustration into work instead. The turning point came unexpectedly during my second year at ByteSecure. A major financial company experienced a devastating data breach, and our small team was called in as part of the recovery effort. Working directly with the senior engineers, I identified vulnerabilities others had missed. When the crisis ended, our CEO Richard Cooper invited me to his office. "You're wasted as a junior developer," he said bluntly. "You have an intuitive understanding of how attackers think. I'd like you to lead a new project exploring preventative encryption methods." Richard became the mentor I desperately needed. In his 50s with salt and pepper hair and decades of industry experience, he recognized potential where others saw only a quiet, socially awkward programmer. Under his guidance, I developed a revolutionary approach to data encryption that could adapt to emerging threats in real time. When I presented my work to the company's board, Richard smiled proudly from the back of the room. The next day, he delivered unexpected news. ByteSecure was being acquired by a tech giant, and my project would be shelved as too experimental. "They're idiots," Richard fumed. "This technology could revolutionize the industry. What will you do now?" The answer came from a place of long-simmering determination. "I'm going to build it myself." 3 months later, I said goodbye to Boston, ignoring my mother's tearful protests. "Silicon Valley? You don't know anyone there." And Allison's dismissive prediction, "You'll be back in 6 months, broke and humble." With my savings, a solid business plan, and Richard's blessing, I arrived in San Francisco with nothing but 2 suitcases and unwavering conviction. My first apartment could generously be described as minimalist, a studio with suspicious stains on the carpet and neighbors who fought dramatically at 2 a.m. I survived on instant ramen and free food from tech meetups, pouring every spare dollar into developing my software. On particularly difficult nights, I'd receive texts from Allison showing exotic vacations or expensive restaurant meals, always with the same question: "How's California treating you?" 6 months in, disaster struck. A critical server crashed, destroying weeks of work. Broke and desperate, I considered admitting defeat when Natalie Jackson walked into my life. A brilliant software architect I'd met at a hackathon, Natalie believed in my vision enough to quit her cushy job at a major tech company. "We're going to make this work," she insisted, clearing space in her apartment for our makeshift office. "But we need to think bigger." With Natalie's expertise complementing my own, Safeguard Technologies took shape. We worked 18-hour days, refining our adaptive encryption system while cold emailing potential investors. For every 100 messages sent, we might receive one curious response. progress was agonizingly slow. The first real breakthrough came after a year of struggle. Marcus Green, a notoriously selective venture capitalist, agreed to a 10-minute meeting that stretched into 3 hours. His parting words changed everything. "I haven't been this excited about a security solution in a decade." Let's talk numbers. With Marcus's seed funding, Safeguard transformed from 2 exhausted women coding in a cramped apartment to a legitimate startup with office space and a small team. Our beta testing attracted attention from several major tech companies, including an acquisition offer that would have made us millionaires overnight. "Take it," my father advised when I called for guidance. "Security is a competitive field, and you've already accomplished more than most entrepreneurs dream of." After sleepless deliberation, Natalie and I declined. The decision terrified me, but something deeper than ambition drove my choice, perhaps the lingering echo of all those times Allison and others had underestimated me. The gamble paid off spectacularly. Within 18 months, Safeguard secured series of funding at a $50 million valuation. By our 3rd year, major corporations were implementing our security solutions, and industry publications were calling our technology revolutionary. Through it all, I maintained a deliberately low profile, declining magazine interviews and speaking engagements, focusing instead on perfecting our product. While our company grew, I kept my success largely private. My parents knew I was doing well, but I shared few details. Allison, now working as a brand ambassador and micro-influencer, continued posting her apparently perfect life: designer clothes, champagne brunches, and celebrity adjacency. What her followers couldn't see were the increasingly desperate requests for loans that occasionally appeared in my inbox, always framed as temporary help until my next big contract. I sent money when asked, never mentioning the growing disparity in our fortunes. Watching Allison's carefully curated online presence, I recognized the hollowness behind her smiles. Her lifestyle required constant maintenance, while my work offered something more substantial: purpose and impact. As Safeguard approached its 5th anniversary, my schedule had become a relentless cycle of investor meetings, product launches, and global client consultations. The quiet girl who once hid behind computers now commanded rooms of executives and negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. Yet for all this professional growth, my personal life remained oddly static: few friends, no serious relationships, and minimal family contact. "You need balance," Natalie warned during a rare weekend off. "All this success means nothing if you're too burnt out to enjoy it." I nodded agreement, but continued working 80-hour weeks, driven by something I couldn't quite articulate. Perhaps it was the lingering fear that pausing might prove Allison right, that my success was temporary, my achievements illusory. Or maybe, after years of being overlooked, I couldn't stop proving my worth, even when no one was watching. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built a fortune while deliberately maintaining the appearance of ordinariness. Meanwhile, Allison had constructed an illusion of success while struggling financially. Neither path had brought true satisfaction. This realization haunted me late one Tuesday night as our company valuation hit $90 million. Alone in my spacious but sparsely furnished apartment, I scrolled through old family photos, wondering when success would finally feel like enough. The embossed cream envelope arrived on a foggy San Francisco morning, looking conspicuously formal amid my stack of tech magazines and business correspondence. My first thought was that it must be another invitation from an industry conference or investor gathering. Opening it revealed something far more unexpected: an engagement party invitation from Allison. "Celebrate love and new beginnings," proclaimed the elegant script. "Join us in honoring the engagement of Allison Bennett and Trevor Hamilton." I stared at the invitation for a full minute, trying to process this development. Trevor Hamilton. The name meant nothing to me. My sister was marrying a complete stranger, someone I'd never heard mentioned in our infrequent communications. The realization stung more than I cared to admit. Accompanying the invitation was a handwritten note on Allison's personalized stationery. "Elaine, I know we haven't been close lately, but family should be present for life's important moments. Trevor is eager to meet you. Please come. Ollie." The casual use of Ollie, a nickname I'd never used, felt like another small reminder of my outsider status. I tossed the invitation onto my kitchen counter and tried to focus on work, but found myself returning to it throughout the day. That evening, my phone rang with my parents' number. "Did you get the invitation?" My mother's voice carried its usual mixture of hope and anxiety. "Allison really wants you there." "I just got it today," I replied non-committally. "I'll have to check my schedule." "Elaine," my father interjected, his voice softer. "I know things haven't been easy between you two, but this is important. Trevor comes from a good family. Very successful in real estate development. Your sister seems settled with him." The subtle emphasis on successful wasn't lost on me. My parents still had no real understanding of my own success, a fact I deliberately maintained. "I'll think about it," I promised before steering the conversation toward their health and activities. After hanging up, I called Samantha Hayes, perhaps my only true friend outside of work. We'd met at a Women in Tech conference 3 years earlier and maintained a friendship despite my workaholic tendencies. "Of course your sister's marrying into real estate money," Sam laughed after I explained the situation. "Was there ever any doubt?" "The real question is whether you're going to attend this party and finally tell your family about Safeguard." "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to show up in a designer dress with company statements in hand. The petty satisfaction would be considerable. But it wouldn't change anything fundamental between us. And it would make me just as validation-seeking as she is." Sam sighed audibly. "Look, Elaine, you're worth $15 million on paper. You've built something extraordinary while your sister has been posting Instagram stories about juice cleanses. You don't need to flaunt it, but maybe stop actively hiding it for your own sake." The following weekend, I found myself at Neiman Marcus, a store I rarely entered despite my financial capacity to shop there regularly. For 2 hours, I tried on dresses that cost more than my monthly rent, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the attention from eager sales associates. Something understated but elegant, I explained to the stylist who'd been assigned to me. "I'm attending a family event and don't want to draw attention." The irony wasn't lost on me, spending thousands on a dress specifically chosen not to be noticed. Eventually, I selected a simple black Armani dress that somehow managed to be both unremarkable and unmistakably expensive, much like my preferred approach to wealth. As the engagement party drew closer, I debated whether to finally reveal the extent of my success to my family. Each morning, I rehearsed casual ways to mention Safeguard's valuation or recent industry awards. Each evening, I convinced myself to maintain my privacy. "They've never been interested in my work before," I told Natalie during a strategy meeting. "Why start now?" "Because success is the best revenge," she suggested with a knowing smile, echoing my father's long-ago advice. 3 days before the party, I booked a flight to Boston and reserved a hotel room downtown, ignoring my mother's insistence that I stay in my childhood bedroom. The night before my departure, an unexpected panic attack left me sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 a.m., struggling to breathe through waves of anxiety. What was I afraid of? Not Allison's judgment. I'd long since outgrown that particular vulnerability. Perhaps it was the prospect of dropping the careful separation I'd maintained between my professional accomplishments and my family identity. Success had become my armor. Sharing it meant potential vulnerability. The morning of my flight brought another surprise. An urgent email from Marcus Green contained news that would have normally sent me into celebrations. Safeguard's latest valuation had officially crossed the $100 million threshold following a major contract signing. My personal stake now approached $15 million. "Congratulations," Marcus wrote. "Few founders reach this milestone, especially women in security tech. You should be extraordinarily proud." Reading his message in the back of an Uber headed to SFO, I felt strangely detached from the achievement. In less than 12 hours, I would be back in Boston, facing my sister and her fiancé, carrying a secret success that had somehow failed to fill the spaces left by our fractured relationship. As the plane took off, I closed my eyes and tried to prepare for whatever awaited me in Boston. One thing seemed certain. After years of deliberately living in the shadows of my own success, something would have to change. I just hadn't anticipated how dramatically that change would arrive. The Hayes Atlantic Hotel in downtown Boston represented everything my sister admired, old money elegance wrapped in modern luxury. Standing outside its imposing entrance, I smoothed my carefully selected dress and took a deep breath. The valet gave my ordinary rental car a dismissive glance before reluctantly taking my keys. The elevator ascended silently to the 19th floor, where a discreet sign directed guests to the Wellington Room. Classical music drifted from the open doors, along with the gentle murmur of polite conversation. I hesitated, suddenly feeling like an imposter despite my professional accomplishments. "Elaine? Is that you?" My mother's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Grace Morrison looked essentially unchanged, her blonde hair, now professionally colored to hide gray, styled perfectly, her dress tastefully expensive, her smile hopeful but anxious. "Hi, Mom." The awkwardness of our embrace reflected 2 years of minimal contact. "Your father will be so happy you made it." She held me at arm's length, assessing my appearance with practiced precision. "The dress is lovely. Very appropriate." Before I could respond, my father appeared. Frank Morrison had aged more visibly than my mother, his hair now completely gray, his stance slightly stooped. But his eyes lit up with genuine pleasure at seeing me. "There's my tech genius," he said, embracing me warmly. "I was beginning to think California had permanently claimed you." "Just busy with work," I replied, the massive understatement making me feel slightly guilty. "Well, come meet Trevor. He's actually quite interested in technology investments. You might have something to talk about." As my father guided me through clusters of well-dressed strangers, I caught fragments of conversation. Property developments, market trends, vacation homes, the familiar soundtrack of privilege that had always made me feel like an outsider. Trevor Hamilton stood near the bar, tall and conventionally handsome in a way that suggested regular gym sessions and expensive haircuts. When he turned to greet me, however, I was surprised by the genuine warmth in his smile. "Elaine." Finally. He shook my hand enthusiastically. "I've heard so much about you. Allison says you're some kind of computer wizard." His earnestness caught me off guard. "I work in cybersecurity," I offered cautiously. "Nothing magical about it." "Don't be modest," he insisted. "Technology is reshaping everything, including our real estate business. I'd love to hear more about your work later." Before I could respond, a ripple of awareness passed through the crowd. Conversation quieted as Allison made her calculated entrance. My sister had always known how to command attention, but the woman who approached us now had elevated the skill to an art form. Her champagne-colored dress caught the light perfectly, her engagement ring prominently displayed on a hand that casually rested against Trevor's arm as she reached him. Everything about her appearance communicated careful curation, not a hair out of place, not an accessory without purpose. "Elaine." Her smile appeared warm, but failed to reach her eyes. "You actually came. What a lovely surprise." She embraced me with practiced affection, air-kissing near my cheek. The subtle scent of her expensive perfume brought back childhood memories of watching her prepare for social events I would never be invited to attend. "Congratulations," I offered, nodding toward Trevor. "Your fiancé was just saying hello. Isn't he wonderful?" Allison's arm slipped possessively through Trevor's. "He's been absolutely dying to meet my mysterious sister. Though I warned him you probably wouldn't make it. Your work keeps you so incredibly busy." The emphasis on incredibly carried the familiar sting of her disbelief, the implied quotation marks around my career that had been present since college. "Fortunately, I managed to clear my schedule," I replied evenly. "Well, we're simply thrilled," Allison said, her voice carrying slightly to ensure nearby guests could hear her performative graciousness. "Family is everything, isn't it? No matter how distant we become." Trevor, seeming genuinely oblivious to the undercurrents, smiled broadly. "I've been telling Allison we should visit you in San Francisco. I've never been to Silicon Valley." "Elaine doesn't actually work in Silicon Valley, darling," Allison corrected him with a patronizing smile. "She's in San Francisco proper. Very different scenes." The fact that she knew this detail surprised me. I couldn't recall mentioning my specific location during our limited communications. Let me introduce you to my future in-laws, Allison continued, already leading me away from Trevor. They're absolutely dying to meet all the Bennetts. Morrisons, I corrected automatically. I kept our family name. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course you did. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and polite conversation. Trevor's parents, Catherine and James Hamilton, represented Boston old money, reserved, impeccably mannered, and subtly assessing. His younger sister Madison seemed perpetually bored, continuously checking her phone while maintaining the minimum required social engagement. Whenever conversation turned to my career, Allison intervened with practiced smoothness. Elaine does something fascinating with computer security. Very technical. She's always been our family brainiac. Each deflection was accompanied by an affectionate touch on my arm or shoulder, physical contact that looked like sisterly pride to observers but communicated a clear warning to me. Stay in your assigned role. Don't disrupt my narrative. During a momentary reprieve from socializing, I retreated to the bathroom to collect myself. As I reapplied lipstick, the door opened to admit Jennifer Wilson, one of Allison's bridesmaids and a friend from her college days. Oh! Elaine, right? Her surprise seemed genuine. I almost didn't recognize you. You look different from your pictures. Pictures? From Allison's Instagram. She posts throwbacks sometimes. You know, family memories and all that. I didn't know. I deliberately avoided my sister's social media presence for years. Jennifer continued, oblivious to my confusion. Anyway, it's nice you could make it. Allison was telling us you probably wouldn't come. Something about being the family disappointment who's always too busy with her very important computer job. She mimicked quotation marks with her fingers, then immediately looked horrified at her own indiscretion. God, I shouldn't have said that. The champagne is stronger than I realized. Just forget I said anything, okay? She hurried out, leaving me staring at my reflection, my sister's true feelings echoing in my mind. Family disappointment. The words shouldn't have hurt after all these years, but they landed with surprising impact. When I returned to the party, I carried new determination. I would get through this evening with dignity intact, maintaining the low profile I'd cultivated professionally. If Allison needed to diminish me to elevate herself in front of her future in-laws, so be it. I had nothing to prove, certainly not in this room, to these people. At least, that was the plan. The Wellington room had been transformed for dinner, round tables arranged around a central dance floor, each setting featuring bone china and crystal that captured the chandelier light. A seating chart directed guests to assigned places. Mine, I noted with resigned amusement, positioned at the furthest table from the bride and groom, sandwiched between Trevor's elderly great-aunt Martha and a distant Hamilton cousin. Strategic placement, I murmured to myself, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. As I made my way to my designated exile, Trevor unexpectedly intercepted me. There you are. I was hoping to catch you before dinner. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, making me increasingly curious about what had attracted him to my sister. I've made a little adjustment to the seating. Hope you don't mind, but I've moved you to our table. Wanted a chance to actually talk. Allison's expression when I approached the main table told me this change hadn't been her idea. Her smile remained fixed as Trevor pulled out the chair beside him, directly across from her. Darling, I thought we agreed your parents should sit closest to you, she said, her voice honeyed, but her eyes communicating clear displeasure. Mom and Dad won't mind, Trevor replied easily. They're enjoying catching up with your parents. Indeed, at a nearby table, my mother was engaged in animated conversation with Catherine Hamilton, while my father and James discussed something that had them both laughing comfortably. The sight was oddly disconcerting, my parents fitting seamlessly into this world that had always seemed beyond our middle-class reality. Dinner began with a series of toasts. Trevor's best friend Daniel praised the couple's perfect partnership. Madison delivered a clearly rehearsed speech about welcoming Allison to their family. When my father stood to speak, I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat. When my daughters were young, he began, his voice slightly unsteady. I used to tell them they were each exceptional in their own way. Allison has always brought beauty and vitality into any room she enters. Her determination to succeed has never wavered. In Trevor, she's found someone who appreciates her unique spirit, and for that, I couldn't be happier. He raised his glass. To Allison and Trevor. To love that sees us clearly and values what it finds. As applause followed, I caught Allison studying me across the table, perhaps searching for signs of hurt at being omitted from our father's toast. I maintained a pleasant expression, clapping politely while taking a deliberate sip of wine. The first course arrived, something artistic involving scallops and microgreens, and conversation resumed around the table. Trevor, true to his word, turned toward me. So tell me about your work, Elaine. Cybersecurity, right? That must be fascinating with everything happening these days. Before I could respond, Allison laughed lightly. Oh, Trevor, don't get her started on computer talk. We'll all be lost in technical jargon within minutes. I can translate to human language, I offered with a small smile. Basically, my company develops encryption systems that protect sensitive data. Her company, Allison echoed, a subtle emphasis suggesting skepticism. Elaine's always been ambitious. Remember when you wanted to build robots in middle school? My sister's the perpetual student, still trying to figure out how to make something of herself. Trevor looked confused by the undercurrent. But that sounds like important work. Data breaches are constantly in the news. It is important, I acknowledged, though not as glamorous as fashion influence. The slight barb was met with Allison's practiced laugh. Well, not everyone needs designer clothes and social connections to feel successful. Elaine's journey is just taking a different path. Her tone transformed the statement into something between pity and dismissal, a conversational technique she'd perfected over years. To casual listeners, she sounded supportive. To me, the message was clear. Conversation shifted to wedding plans as the main course arrived. Allison detailed elaborate arrangements for a ceremony at the Hamilton family's Cape Cod estate, followed by a reception for 300 guests. The flowers alone are costing a fortune, she said with practiced casualness. But Trevor's parents have been incredibly generous. They understand the importance of doing things properly. Her gaze flickered toward our parents. Trevor's family is handling most expenses since my side clearly can't afford to contribute much. My father studied his plate, while my mother nodded with forced brightness. The Hamiltons have been absolutely wonderful. We're so grateful. The assumption of our family's financial limitations, once accurate but now wildly incorrect in my case, hung awkwardly in the air. I could have corrected it easily, mentioning Safeguard's recent valuation or my personal net worth. Instead, I took another bite of overcooked salmon and remained silent. As dinner progressed, Allison's comments grew increasingly pointed. Remember when Elaine insisted on wearing that horrible secondhand dress to junior prom? She asked the table during dessert. Mom tried so hard to convince her to let us buy something appropriate, but she was always so stubborn. I thought it was vintage, I corrected mildly. And it was comfortable. It was a fashion disaster, Allison countered with a laugh that invited others to join. But that's my sister. Practical to a fault. Style and social graces were never her priority. With each anecdote, Allison carefully constructed an image of me as the family oddball, academically gifted but socially inept, perpetually struggling to find my place. Trevor's attempts to steer conversation toward neutral ground were repeatedly intercepted and redirected. How long have you been in San Francisco now? He asked during coffee. Almost 6 years, I replied. Living in that same tiny apartment? Allison interjected before I could continue. Elaine believes in minimalism. All work, no indulgences. My apartment, while not extravagant, occupied the top floor of a renovated Victorian in Pacific Heights, hardly the struggling tech worker hovel she implied. But correcting her would require explaining my financial reality, a disclosure I still wasn't prepared to make. As dinner concluded, Allison stood for a final toast, champagne flute raised elegantly. I want to thank everyone who made this evening special, particularly those who've truly accomplished something with their lives. Her gaze swept the room, deliberately bypassing me before landing on Trevor with practiced adoration. To building a future with substance and meaning. The targeted exclusion was so obvious that Trevor's mother frowned slightly, while Madison raised an eyebrow in apparent surprise at the tacky display. I maintained my composed expression, though internally I was calculating the fastest escape route from this increasingly toxic evening. As guests began moving toward the dance floor or bar, I quietly gathered my clutch, planning a discreet exit. Trevor, however, had other ideas. Not escaping yet, he said, pulling out my chair. I still haven't heard properly about your work, and I'm genuinely interested. Let's grab fresh drinks. With surprising determination, he guided me toward a quiet corner of the room, away from Allison's monitoring gaze. For the first time that evening, I felt a glimmer of genuine curiosity about this man my sister had chosen. So, he said, handing me a glass of sparkling water. Tell me about this company you work for. What's it called? The question that would unintentionally change everything had been asked. Safeguard Technologies, I answered after a moment's hesitation. The name felt strange on my lips in this context, like accidentally speaking a foreign language in a room where no one would understand. Trevor's brow furrowed slightly. Safeguard, why does that sound familiar? They do something with adaptive encryption, right? His unexpected knowledge caught me off guard. Yes, actually. How did you know that? I read a lot of business news, he explained, pulling out his phone. The name's been coming up in tech investment circles. Let me check something. Across the room, I noticed Allison watching our conversation with poorly disguised concern. She extricated herself from a cluster of bridesmaids and began moving in our direction. Boring her with real estate talk already? Allison's voice carried artificial lightness as she reached us, her hand possessively claiming Trevor's arm. Poor Elaine probably hasn't understood a word. Trevor looked up from his phone, momentarily distracted. Actually, we were discussing her company. Safeguard Technologies. I was just looking it up because I remembered reading something. Her company? Allison's laugh held a sharp edge. Trevor, honey, Elaine works for a tech company. She's not an executive or anything. She's just a nobody who works there. The dismissal was delivered with such casual certainty that Trevor looked momentarily confused, glancing between us. I remained silent, a lifetime of allowing Allison's narratives to go unchallenged, keeping me passive even now. Let me just check, Trevor said, returning to his phone. Safeguard, here it is. Founded in 2017, specializes in adaptive encryption technology, recent $100 million valuation following. His voice trailed off as he continued reading, his expression shifting from casual interest to genuine surprise. He looked up at me, then back at his phone, then at me again. Wait, you're that Elaine Morrison? The founder and CEO. The question hung in the air between us. Around us, nearby conversations quieted as guests registered Trevor's tone of shocked recognition. Allison's smile remained fixed, but confusion clouded her eyes. What are you talking about? She asked, trying to maintain her composure. Trevor turned his phone screen toward her. Safeguard Technologies. Founded by Elaine Morrison and Natalie Jackson. Current valuation. He paused, eyes widening slightly. Estimated net worth. $15 million. The silence that followed seemed to expand, filling the room with its weight. Allison stared at the screen, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the blood draining from her face. My parents, drawn by the unusual quiet, approached uncertainly. What's going on? My father asked. Trevor, still processing his discovery, looked almost apologetic. I was just looking up Elaine's company. I didn't realize she was, well, kind of a big deal in tech security. My mother's confused gaze darted between us. Elaine's company? What company? The moment crystallized decades of misunderstanding and missed connections. My family, the people who should have known me best, had no idea who I'd become. The realization was both liberating and profoundly sad. Safeguard Technologies, I confirmed quietly. I co-founded it 6 years ago. We provide adaptive encryption systems to major corporations and government agencies. $15 million? Allison's voice emerged as barely more than a whisper, the number clearly overwhelming any other detail. I shrugged slightly. The valuation just increased, actually. The $15 million is probably my personal stake, not the company's total worth. A strange mixture of emotions crossed my sister's face: disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been anger or shame. Her perfect engagement party narrative had just collapsed spectacularly. "You never said anything," my father said, his voice caught between accusation and awe. "All these years, when we asked about your work. You asked if I was doing okay," I corrected gently. "I always said yes, because I was. But this is extraordinary." My mother's voice carried across the room, drawing more attention. "Why wouldn't you tell us something this important?" The real answer, because you never really wanted to know, seemed too cruel for this public moment. Instead, I offered a partial truth. Success means different things to different people. Mine just happens to be quieter than most. Trevor's parents had joined our growing circle now, along with several curious guests. The Hamilton patriarch studied me with new interest. "Safeguard, your company handled security for the Brennan merger last year, didn't it? Extraordinary work. We tried to get a consultation for Hamilton properties, but were told your client list was at capacity." "We've expanded since then," I replied, falling into the familiar comfort of professional conversation. "I'd be happy to connect you with our commercial division." As I spoke, I watched Allison's expression transition from shock to a calculating assessment. With remarkable speed, she recalibrated her approach. "This is exactly what I've been trying to tell everyone," she announced, her voice projecting confidence she couldn't possibly feel. "My sister is brilliant but so modest about her accomplishments. I've always known she would do something extraordinary." The blatant revision of history was breathtaking in its audacity. For a moment, I considered challenging her, bringing up her family disappointment comments from earlier, or the years of dismissive references to my computer hobby. The room waited for my response, collective attention focused on our sisterly dynamic now exposed. Trevor watched the exchange with new awareness, his perception of his fiancée visibly shifting. When his gaze met mine, I saw something unexpected, not just respect for my accomplishments, but growing concern about the woman he'd chosen to marry. "Safeguard's success has been a team effort," I said finally, choosing restraint over righteousness. "I've been fortunate to work with exceptional people." The simple statement, while true, did nothing to ease the tension radiating from Allison. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes communicated pure panic as she watched her carefully constructed social hierarchy crumbling. Her future in-laws were now engaged in enthusiastic conversation with me about technology investments, while Trevor stood slightly apart, studying his fiancée with newfound scrutiny. "You'll have to visit our offices next time you're in San Francisco," I offered to Catherine Hamilton, who had mentioned their regular trips to the Bay Area. "We would love that," she replied warmly. "Trevor, you've been talking about expanding your understanding of tech investments. This would be perfect." Trevor nodded, his enthusiasm noticeably dampened as he continued observing Allison's increasingly brittle performance. "Perhaps we could all go," Allison suggested with forced brightness. "Make it a pre-wedding trip." I've always been so supportive of Elaine's work. The statement was so flagrantly false that several people who had witnessed her earlier dismissals exchanged uncomfortable glances. My father caught my eye across the group, his expression a complex mixture of pride, confusion, and regret. As conversations continued around us, Allison gradually maneuvered herself back to my side, maintaining her camera-ready smile while speaking through clenched teeth. "Why would you humiliate me like this at my own engagement party?" she hissed. "You could have mentioned your precious company any time before tonight. Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have assumed I was exaggerating to compete with you?" Her silence was answer enough. For all our shared history, my sister had never truly seen me, only the reflection of herself she projected onto my existence. The realization brought no satisfaction, only a dull sadness for what our relationship might have been. As the evening began winding down, The damage to Allison's perfect narrative was complete. Guests departed with congratulations that increasingly included questions about my work and invitations to connect professionally. Even Madison, previously dismissive, asked for my card, for a friend interested in tech security. Throughout it all, Allison maintained her polished facade, though the strain showed increasingly in her tightened jaw and overly bright smile. Trevor remained thoughtful and subdued, his earlier enthusiasm noticeably dimmed. As I prepared to leave, he approached alone. "I feel like I should apologize," he said quietly. "If I hadn't Googled your company." "You have nothing to apologize for," I assured him. "Curiosity is a quality I value." He nodded, glancing toward Allison, who was engaged in animated conversation with her bridesmaids across the room. "I'm beginning to wonder how many other things I've been misinformed about." The implied question hung between us, asking for neither confirmation nor denial. For a moment, I considered warning him about the pattern I'd observed throughout my life. Allison's need to diminish others to elevate herself, her inability to celebrate anyone else's success, her carefully curated narratives that bore little resemblance to reality. Instead, I simply said, "It's important to enter marriage with clear vision about yourself and your partner." He studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Thank you for coming tonight." It was illuminating in ways I hadn't expected. As I left the Wellington room, I caught a final glimpse of my sister. Surrounded by admirers, but standing somehow alone, still beautiful but suddenly less certain, Allison's gaze met mine across the thinning crowd. In that unguarded moment, I saw something unexpected beneath her perfect exterior. Not just anger or embarrassment, but a flicker of genuine fear. The truth, once exposed, could not be contained again. And neither of us was entirely prepared for what would follow. My hotel room offered blessed quiet after the emotional tumult of the evening. Removing my carefully selected Armani dress, I changed into comfortable pajamas and sat cross-legged on the king-sized bed, attempting to process everything that had transpired. The insistent buzzing of my phone interrupted this reflection. Natalie's name flashed on screen, the California time difference meaning my evening drama had occurred during her workday. "So," she asked when I answered, "how bad was it?" "Well," I said slowly, "my sister's engagement party ended with approximately 60 Boston socialites discovering my net worth." Natalie's startled laugh carried through the speaker. "Wait, what?" "I need details. All of them. Now." As I recounted the evening's events, the absurdity of the situation became increasingly apparent. Years of carefully maintained privacy undone by a simple Google search and an innocent question. "The Trevor guy sounds decent, at least," Natalie observed when I finished. "Though I question his judgment in proposing to your sister." "That may be under reconsideration," I admitted. He seemed disillusioned by the end of the night. We talked until Natalie needed to leave for a meeting, her parting advice typically direct: "Don't leave town without having an honest conversation with your parents. They deserve that much." After hanging up, I ordered room service and checked emails, attempting to maintain normalcy amid emotional upheaval. Just after midnight, an unexpected knock at my door revealed Trevor, still in his dinner clothes though looking considerably less polished. "I hope it's not too late," he said, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. I need to apologize properly. What I did was thoughtless." I invited him in, gesturing toward the sitting area of my suite. "It's fine, Trevor. Really. It would have come out eventually." "Maybe," he conceded, declining my offer of water or coffee. "But not necessarily at the engagement party." I embarrassed Allison, which wasn't fair, regardless of. He trailed off, clearly struggling with diplomatic phrasing. "Regardless of her misrepresentation of my circumstances?" I offered. He nodded, running a hand through his previously immaculate hair. "I keep wondering what else might not be as described. The past 2 years suddenly feel questionable." The vulnerability in his expression stirred unexpected compassion. Whatever his flaws in partner selection, Trevor seemed genuinely distressed by the evening's revelations. "People show different faces in different contexts," I said carefully. "My sister has always needed external validation. It doesn't make her a bad person, just a complicated one. You're being incredibly generous considering how she spoke about you before, well, before everyone knew about Safeguard. We talked for nearly an hour, his questions gradually shifting from Allison to my work, genuine interest replacing the social politeness of earlier conversations. When he finally left, the unspoken question of his engagement hung between us, not my question to answer, but clearly one he was actively considering. Morning brought another visitor, my parents, arriving at 9 with coffee and pastries from my favorite childhood bakery. The awkwardness of our initial greeting gave way to genuine conversation as we sat in my suite's small living area. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked finally, the hurt evident in his voice. "About the company, your success. Any of it?" The question deserved an honest answer, however uncomfortable. Because it was simpler not to. Mom has always struggled to understand my work, and there's always been this underlying expectation that Allison would be the successful one, just in more traditional ways. My mother flinched slightly. "That's not fair, Elaine. We've always been proud of your intelligence." "Proud, but not particularly interested," I corrected gently. "When was the last time either of you asked detailed questions about what I actually do? Or showed genuine curiosity about my company beyond whether it was keeping me financially stable?" Their silence acknowledged the truth of my observation. "It wasn't malicious," I continued. "But there's been this family dynamic since childhood, Allison as the social success, me as the quirky smart one who might eventually find my place. Changing that narrative felt unnecessary and potentially disruptive. So you let us believe you were just getting by in a tiny apartment while actually becoming a millionaire?" My father's tone balanced bewilderment and admiration. "I never lied," I pointed out. "I just didn't volunteer information. And I never claimed to be struggling financially." "You sent money when we asked for help with the roof repair," my mother remembered suddenly. "We thought you were being generous despite limited means." "I was being generous, period," I said. "My financial situation doesn't change that intention." The conversation continued through a second round of coffee, gradually transitioning from recriminations to genuine questions about Safeguard and my life in San Francisco. For perhaps the first time, my parents listened with real interest as I explained adaptive encryption and venture capital funding rounds. "I wish I'd understood sooner," my father said finally. "I could have followed your journey, celebrated your milestones." "You still can," I offered. "This doesn't have to be an ending. It could be a beginning instead." They left with promises of dinner the following evening and a tentative plan for them to visit California in the spring. The conversation hadn't erased decades of misunderstanding, but it had opened a door previously sealed by assumptions on both sides. I had just finished packing when the final, inevitable confrontation arrived. Allison didn't bother knocking, instead using the key card I'd requested for my parents in case of emergency. "We need to talk," she announced, closing the door firmly behind her. My sister looked simultaneously immaculate and undone, her outfit and makeup perfect, but her eyes revealing a sleepless night and simmering anger. "About?" I asked, though we both knew perfectly well. "You humiliated me." The words burst forth with such genuine anguish that my prepared defenses faltered. "My engagement party, the most important night of my life, and you turned it into some twisted revenge fantasy." "That wasn't my intention," I replied calmly. "Trevor asked about my work." I answered honestly. "Everything that followed was beyond my control. You could have told me privately. Warned me before I looked like a complete fool in front of Trevor's entire family." The accusation carried a kernel of truth that stung despite its hyperbole. Perhaps I could have found a moment to privately update her on my circumstances before the party. When would that conversation have happened, Allison? During one of our twice-yearly texts? Or perhaps when you were busy telling your friends I was the family disappointment? Her flinch confirmed Jennifer's bathroom indiscretion had been accurate. That was just social talk. It didn't mean anything. It meant something to me, I countered. Just like every dismissive comment about my little computer hobby or assumption that I was barely surviving financially. Those narratives meant something. They reinforced the story you've been telling about me since we were children. "What story?" she demanded, though her defiance seemed more performative than genuine. That I'm less than you. Less attractive, less successful, less worthy of attention or admiration. That your light can only shine if mine remains hidden. The raw truth hung between us. For a moment, Allison's carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing something vulnerable and wounded beneath. You were supposed to be the smart one, she said finally, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. That was our deal. I got the social stuff, the beauty, the attention. You got the brains. But then you got everything else too. The money, the success, the respect. What does that leave for me? The question contained such genuine distress that my lingering anger dissipated. My sister, beautiful, socially adept, seemingly confident Allison, had been competing against a shadow version of me that existed only in her imagination. It's not a zero-sum game, I said gently. My success doesn't diminish yours. There's room for both of us to thrive, just in different arenas. She shook her head, not ready to accept this perspective. Trevor's family looked at me differently after they learned about you. Like they were reevaluating their assessment. Even Trevor. She trailed off, unable to verbalize her deepest fear, that her fiancé might be reconsidering their relationship. If Trevor's feelings change based on my net worth, that reflects on him, not you, I pointed out. And certainly not on us as sisters. We talked for nearly 2 hours, moving gradually from recrimination to tentative understanding. Decades of competition and miscommunication couldn't be resolved in a single hotel room conversation, but perhaps a foundation for something healthier could begin. I don't know if I can come to the wedding, I admitted as our conversation wound down. It might be better for everyone if I send my congratulations from a distance. Allison studied me for a long moment before responding. I need to think about that too. About a lot of things, actually. We parted with an awkward hug that contained more genuine emotion than any of our interactions in years. Whether this represented a new beginning or final closure remained unclear, but the honesty itself felt like progress. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my San Francisco apartment, watching fog roll over the Golden Gate Bridge while contemplating how dramatically life had changed since that fateful engagement party. Trevor and Allison had postponed their wedding to reevaluate priorities, a euphemism for the relationship difficulties that had emerged once their carefully maintained illusions faced reality. Whether they would eventually marry remained uncertain, though Allison's social media now featured fewer curated perfection shots and more authentic glimpses of her life, including her new position at a legitimate fashion consulting firm. My parents had visited twice, genuinely engaging with my world for perhaps the first time. My father had toured the Safeguard offices with unabashed pride, while my mother had made sincere if sometimes awkward attempts to understand my industry. Small steps, but meaningful ones. The most significant change, however, had been internal. After years of defining success through quiet achievement and financial metrics, I'd begun reconsidering what truly mattered. Safeguard had recently reached a $200 million valuation, but I found myself more energized by our new initiative supporting women in technology than by the additional zeros in my net worth. The Women in Security Mentorship program we'd established, intentionally headquartered in Boston rather than Silicon Valley, now supported 50 young women pursuing careers in cybersecurity. The irony of creating opportunity in the city where I'd felt most overlooked wasn't lost on me. My phone chimed with a text from Natalie, reminding me about tomorrow's investor meeting. As I turned to head inside, I paused to appreciate the view once more, not just of the physical landscape, but of the journey that had brought me here. The truth about worth had nothing to do with net worth, designer dresses, or social validation. Real value came from authentic connections, meaningful work, and the courage to be seen completely, flaws, successes, and all. My sister had spent years telling anyone who would listen that I was a nobody. In trying to prove her wrong, I'd nearly become exactly that, a person defined by financial success, but hidden behind protective walls of privacy and work. The Google search that revealed my net worth had ultimately revealed something far more valuable, the possibility of genuine connection beyond the narratives we construct about ourselves and others. As the fog continued its relentless advance across the bay, I sent a brief text to my sister, not about the past or our complicated history, but a simple question about her upcoming visit to San Francisco. Small steps towards something real. Something worth more than $15 million could ever purchase. Have you ever had a family member underestimate your potential or success? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. I'd love to hear your stories of overcoming doubters and proving them wrong. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about family dynamics, success, and personal growth. Remember to share with someone who might need a reminder that their worth isn't defined by others' opinions. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't proving others wrong, but discovering your own true worth.